When did one compliment destroy your entire life? My husband Marcus had been invisible to women his entire life, and I became his first everything after 3 months of persistent pursuit. Even after we married, he'd look at me with such disbelief, like I might vanish if he blinked too hard, constantly reminding me how no woman had ever chosen him before, how even cashiers avoided eye contact when giving him change. I'd grown used to being his anchor in a world that ignored him, which is why that Tuesday stood out so sharply when he came home practically glowing. He told me about the woman at lunch who'd approached him about his sci-fi novel, and I watched him touch his chest in wonder because for the first time in his life, a woman had started the conversation. Her uncle wrote it, Marcus explained excitedly while I chopped vegetables for dinner, and I smiled because I hadn't seen him this animated in months. They'd exchanged numbers to discuss the book series, and suddenly my husband was checking his phone constantly, grinning at messages about shared interests in gaming and movies. I noticed him dressing better for work, actually using the cologne I'd bought him last Christmas, even hitting the gym during lunch breaks instead of eating alone in his car like usual. His confidence bloomed, and our friends commented on how good he looked lately, while I felt proud that this friendship was bringing out the best in him. When he mentioned meeting Jasmine for coffee to return her uncle's signed book, I didn't think twice about it because Marcus deserved to have friends who shared his interests, and seeing him happy made my chest warm with love. Then I found him one night creating a fake Instagram account, claiming he needed it for professional networking, but I caught glimpses of him scrolling through Jasmine's photos obsessively, zooming in on her face with trembling fingers. The gentle man who used to hold me while we watched documentaries was disappearing, replaced by someone who jumped whenever his phone buzzed. He started going to places she'd mentioned in their texts, the coffee shop downtown, that new bookstore on 5th Street. His phone became sacred territory, and he'd angle it away whenever messages came through, though I noticed him screenshotting certain conversations before quickly deleting them. She called me handsome today, he announced randomly during dinner one night, then spent an hour analyzing what she might have meant while I sat there watching the man I loved fade away bite by bite. He began comparing everything I did to her, mentioning how Jasmine texted him good morning every day while I made him wait 3 months just to get a date. When I asked why he was being so distant lately, he exploded about how I never initiated anything, never made him feel wanted, just settled for him while Jasmine truly saw his worth. Jasmine invited him to her apartment to see her uncle's original manuscript, and Marcus told me he had a weekend work conference. I knew he was lying because his boss had called looking for him earlier that day, but something desperate in his eyes made me stay quiet, hoping the Marcus I married was still in there somewhere. 3 days later, he came home destroyed, his face blotchy and red while he ranted about female manipulation. Through his hysteria, I pieced together what happened. Jasmine's roommate was actually her boyfriend, and they'd been running a business together. She was an attention coach who specifically sought out pathetic men, flirted with them until they got emotionally attached, then revealed her next session would $500. He'd screamed at her about leading him on, but she'd pulled up their text conversations on her laptop, showing him how he'd imagined every flirtation, how she'd only ever been professionally friendly. When he stormed into our bedroom still raging, he found my suitcase half-packed because I'd discovered his folder labeled receipts filled with screenshots of her messages and photos. I reached for his hands, trying to find the sweet man who used to write me poetry on napkins, telling him softly that I loved him, that I had something wonderful to share. "You trapped me just like her," he screamed when I told him I was pregnant, that I'd been waiting for our anniversary to surprise him with the baby shoes I'd hidden in my nightstand. I stepped toward him, tears streaming, begging him to remember who we were before Jasmine, but he shoved me away with such force that I flew backwards into our dresser. The corner caught my lower back, and I felt something tear inside me while he stood there still ranting about how women had conspired his whole life to make him feel worthless. I drove myself to the hospital, clutching my belly while he followed, yelling through the emergency room until security banned him. The doctors couldn't save our baby, and when the nurse told me I'd miscarried, Marcus was in the parking lot leaving me voicemails about how this proved women always abandoned him. I filed for divorce and a restraining order while Marcus spiraled deeper into his delusion, the man I'd loved completely gone. The bank statements I saw during divorce proceedings showed hundreds in monthly payments to Jasmine through fake names, desperate attempts to prove she really wanted him, that he wasn't as worthless as he believed. Maybe all those women who looked through him like glass weren't being cruel after all, they were just seeing something I couldn't.